everyone. It is past 6, so we will call the meeting to order. I will start by acknowledging that the land which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the Andawannaron, Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, or for our fauna and the land we inhabit. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We need a motion for the approval of the previous minutes. Were there any concerns with the previous minutes? Linda, thank you. Seconder. Bastian, thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, we don't have any delegations today, but we have a couple of updates in item 5. First being the Joe Rickards annual monitoring report presentation. So I saw Hadley was on and Alex had mentioned, Joe, that you're on as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Hadley.
Yep, I made sure I checked to make sure Joe was on because it would be a short meeting if he wasn't. Hi everybody. I'll be up there in June. Sorry I'm not there tonight. It's a nice day in Ohio. It looks like it's sunny there too, so that's good. I just want to talk about a few things before Joe jumps into it though, and he'll run his own presentation. First off, the last time we presented this, can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. The last time we presented it, I think Eric asked, what about the plant itself? Because we say this area is not included in the analysis that Joe does. And it was a fair question. So we really looked at that this year. And we basically I decided that we're going to redo the plant too. So we won't have it right away. It won't be part of this presentation. So it's still not included in the analysis, but probably mid-year, end of the year, probably end of the year, because we have to sample the wells, which I think is in July. And then Joe will do his thing on the keystone section of property that is actually the plant itself. So we'll have an update for that to show you what degradation we're seeing on site to help formulate the whole picture, right? Because we're just showing you the offsite plume, but we'll show on site as well and see what's going on there. Any questions on that one? Okay.
And then that's good.
Okay. The other 2 updates don't directly relate to Joe's presentation, but I put in the notes, we talked about how clean are we treating the water from the system, the combined system, and we put in some data for that. We put it against the drinking water standards, and we are below for the things that we're monitoring for, which is chlorobenzene and NDMA. We're below drinking water standards. But again, we're not chlorinating this. We're not making it safe for human consumption, but the objectives from the treatment system are being met to a drinking water standard. Because the creek, it's even more stringent for some of the analysis. So that was an Excel file that was part of the notes that Alex printed. So if anybody has questions on that, we can talk about that now or talk about it later after Joe's presentation. And then finally, we did, because the last quarter's a couple months ago track meeting, we had that robust discussion, and it was evident that the regions need to start talking more. And I won't put words in Carl's mouth, but we have started the discussion, so that's a good thing. We have met once, and it was a lengthy discussion. Jason was also on, and I think we're getting close to next steps. There will be some lawyers involved because we have to work out access agreements and so on. So that always takes a little bit of time. But hopefully we can do that pumping test or do other studies to understand how that well to the south side on Scotch line would work. If it would move the plume or not if it were pumping, so we could get some further information on it. So that's all I have, and I'll let Joe do his presentation, and then if there's any questions, we can discuss that as well at the end.
Good, thank you, Heather.
All right, I guess I will take over. I need to first I'll say hi to everybody, put my camera on and say hello, and I'll run through this again. I think most folks on the call or in the meeting here have seen these analyses. I'll go through, explain it a little bit and talk about it, and then I don't remember how we do it. If we take questions during or after, I'm fine either way. That's, if you just want to interrupt me and say, hey, Joe, I got a question, that's fine. Or we can go to the end. Doesn't matter to me. But let me share my screen. Hopefully this will work. I'm working off the web browser here. Yeah, hopefully that's working. If I can get a heads up from somebody that you guys can see it okay.
Yes,
Yep.
you can.
Yeah.
Okay, you're seeing the presentation. I'm used to a Teams meeting. I'm not used to this format here. So anyway, all right. Well, hopefully this is good. I'll jump into it. And like I said, I think most folks have seen this and presentation. So it's laid out. We're doing really the two constituents, NDMA, chlorobenzene, in the two, upper and lower municipal aquifers, and they're, divided just like you see on the screen here. So I'll walk through these, and like I said, any questions, feel free to, stop me, or I'm okay either way. So what I'll do is I'll click onto this NDMA. This is a PowerPoint presentation. I think everybody has it. It's been provided. And so you can navigate it just by clicking the buttons and take you where you want to go. So if I click on NDMA in the upper, you can see, the plume map, and this shows, again, just as NDMA, what the plume looked like in 1993. To Hadley's point, you can notice, we talked about this before, we have excluded everything inside this orange window, which is pretty much everything inside the site, because most of the wells on the site stopped being sampled in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. So they haven't been sampled in several years. So we just decided to only analyze the off-site plume. So what we do is what's known as, or what's in the literature as a Ricker method plume stability analysis, and that is a method I developed, and we've used it on, lots of sites. It's very well reviewed and vetted out. So the idea of the Ricker method is to look at the plume with different whole plume analysis metrics, and those metrics are tabulated on the right over here. So we look at the aerial extent, which is essentially the footprint of the plume. Everything you see in this domain is included in this plume area. So 376 hectares roughly, that includes these excluded areas that are, these little dashed areas that are, shown where the aquifer does not exist. And then the next thing we can look at is an average concentration, and that's across this entire aerial extent. So that's part of the Ricker method. It's a spatial integration technique. I won't go into how that works here. That's in a published paper. If you want to review it, it's more than, you're able to look at that. It's in the public domain. And then we can take these two metrics and combine them with a thickness and a porosity to get a mass estimate or mass indicator. In this case, 79.4 kilograms. That's the estimated dissolved mass throughout this plume. The last thing I'll point out here is the center of mass. The cross in the middle is the centroid of all concentrations, or, the center of mass in this case. And we can track that through time as well. So again, the date we're looking at is 1993 in the top right. And what I'll do is I'll show every plume map for every year from that date forward. And I'll play it a couple times so I can explain a couple things with it. So I'll hit play here. And what you're seeing is actual plumes over time. You can see the dates change up here. The metrics are changing. Track the center of mass, what it's doing. And you can see as time goes on, all the way to 2025. So about 33 years of data in less than 30 seconds. It's a lot of information, I understand, but it lets you see visually how the plume has changed. And you can see it really has reduced over time all the way to 2025. And one thing I'll point out, some of the symbology, I'll go back to the beginning and play it again, but you'll notice a lot of wells in this view are orange, and so most of them are still black though. So in our analysis, a black well indicates it has data, it's being used. We just don't have enough room to post all the concentrations and well names. There are just too many wells in this view. But a black well means it's being used, it has data, and you can see that in the legend here. An orange well, we call that a hanging well. And what that means is when a well turns orange in this video, at that point, it stops being sampled, or we no longer have data for that particular well. So we color it orange to let you know hey, there's a well there, but we don't have data for it. So you can see a lot of the wells on site are orange. And in fact, if I back the video up, you can see back in 2017, a lot of these wells are black, indicating they have data. And then as I play this forward, you can see in the by 2020, all those wells are orange. So a lot of those wells have not been sampled, since 2019. So I'll take this back to the very beginning, and you can see that I'm playing it forward now. And then you see some of these wells turn orange on the site, indicating they're not being, they stopped being sampled and all that. So here's some more orange wells here. But that's what the orange wells mean. Another symbol that you might see on the map is this blue control point. And we do use control points up here to the north just to help bound the plume. And in the later data, we have actual wells that are measured that are non-detect. So using these control points, I don't think affects the plume in any way, but it does bound it in the early data. So that's another symbol that you'll see. And then the last thing I'll point out, a well that is hanging, the orange well, sometimes that well might always be non-detect. And if it's always non-detect, we'll use that same well going forward as a non-detect location. So some wells, there's one over here where my cursor is, that's orange indicating it's hanging, but it also has a blue dot. So it's a well that was always non-detect, but we're using it as a control point going forward. Same thing with these wells out here to the west. You can
And
see,
the other,
yeah.
Joe, the other black wells in that picture then are non-detect as well. Is that right?
Oh yes, yes. These if it's black, it has data, and if it's outside the plume, it's non-detect. That is true. Yes. It is, or it is below the base contour. It might be detected, but it's below 0.009 micrograms per liter, which is the base contour. Thank you, Heather. I should have pointed that out for NDMA. So this plume is delineated to a level of 9 parts per trillion, or 0.009 parts per billion. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'll let this play to the end again. I know that was a lot. I won't go through this every time. I just want to make sure we have lay of the land for all the folks on the call. So that goes to 2025, and you can see based on last year's, the most recent data, it's 0.27 kilograms dissolved mass, 132 hectares still, but it has reduced quite a bit. If I back it up one level, it's right there. Here's 2024, and you can see we're at 0.34 kilograms for a mass. And if I go forward to 2025, it does come down again to 0.27. This is a historically low value, so indicating it is getting smaller as time goes on. And you can see we have this, I don't want to say bifurcation, but you can see where there's a division here. And it's really because this well MU1 was installed, and was a non-detect location in 2025. So when I back it up, you'll notice that well is not there. So that well was installed. And based on that level here, we're showing a division, a break in the data here. E79 right here still has very, very low levels of NDMA. So that's the video. So after we play the video, we can.
Joe, if I can interrupt just for a moment, there's a question for you.
Yes, please.
I'm just curious, comparing the plume mass from 24 to 25, it goes down 0.07 kgs. If you compared the pumping rates, the treatment rates, and what concentration is mass coming out there, how much of the disappearance can you attribute to the pump and treat versus some other loss?
So I have not made that calculation. I don't. My sole scope here is looking at dissolved plume behavior, but that's not to say you couldn't do that. So I don't know what those numbers are, but that comparison could be made.
Maybe Lou and I can try to look at that and see if we can come up with an answer based on the mass that we think we've removed from the system itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because would that be a check on kind of numbers make sense? The record method and what we're observing, or is that they're just not related?
They're conceptually related.
They are related, and you can make those calculations. They're not exactly comparable though, because they're, one's a measured in place and one is groundwater recovered, so that they're not apples to apples true comparisons, but we do that a lot. We do look at mass recovered from a system and compare it to mass in place reduction, which doesn't, it's not as precise a number, the mass in place. Our main concern here is looking at relative changes through time, not necessarily what the true dissolved mass is. I hope that makes sense. So the main thing that I'm going to focus on is the mass in place is getting lower and lower. And as that happens, the lower and lower that mass goes, that rate of decrease gets less and less as well. But maybe this is a side discussion. I don't have those data in front of me, so I can't really, talk about it.
There's one more question for you, Sebastian.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Joe. Plume mass indicator, ideally, we'd like that down to 0 kilograms. That, of course, is probably impossible to reach. So the question might be, at what point do we hit a mass level when the base is at 0.009 micrograms per liter? So is there any way of calculating how much mass might be left, and we can say, that's it, we've hit that magic mark? Is there any way of calculating that?
I'm not sure I understand the question,
Okay.
but
I think you're saying, could we calculate how much mass would be in place if the entire plume was 0.009?
Correct.
And the issue is still that this is all under pumping conditions. So I don't know how to answer it either, because it's a steady state we're pumping, but that's not maybe the mass that's in the system. That's the mass that's in the system while we're pumping. I don't know, Joe. I might kick it to you now that I've convoluted it more.
well, if every well was 0.009, there would be 0 plume. There'd be no plume, so the mass would be 0. Now, if it's 0.00901 or some tiny number above it, it's going to be some very, very tiny mass. I mean, we could calculate that, but that's just an exercise, and take any area with that low of a number and calculate what the mass would be. But that's hypothetical. I mean, it could be calculated, but I don't know that it's helpful.
Maybe Tiffany can add some clarity.
Well, I was just actually, I think maybe what Sebastian's sort of maybe getting at is, do we have a handle on what the back diffusion might be? Like what's trapped and not measured under non-pumping conditions that would redissolve? Is that maybe do we have a handle on that kind of value?
It's a little bit deeper than I thought, but that's getting direct. Okay, yeah.
Like the plume analysis is showing what's dissolved and what's measurable. But if we stop pumping, and Hadley, you mentioned that it's under pump conditions, if we stop pumping, the way we're intermittently pumping E7, and then mass shows up in E7 and we pump it again, that's sort of improving the recovery rate of pumping. That's what I think we're kind of trying to get at.
If I can, Tiffany, it's Lou. I think, Sebastian, you were asking, and just to clarify, but you were asking if Joe's Plume Analytics can be used as a predictive tool as to when the remedy would be complete. Is that what you were asking? I think that's what you're asking. Maybe I'm wrong.
It'd be nice. I mean, ultimately, I'd just like to know how many percent or portions of a kilogram remain in a steady state environment where we're not pumping and treating, which would still allow us to say we've hit the target because it is at or below 0.009 parts per micrograms per liter. Okay, so I'm just wondering if the calculation could be made, because we're never going to get that down to 0. So if we're not going to get that ideal number of 0, what is the next best? And I'm just wondering if we can calculate that.
So Joe, I don't know if you can answer that, Joe.
I don't know that I can. I don't know what, because 0 mass just means your concentration is at 0.009, because it's based on whatever boundary we decide to use. I don't know how to get to the answer on that. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, to be honest.
Maybe if I can hop in, just the question that Lou had asked is, can we draw inferences based on any of this data? Is that possible, or is this just
Yes.
descriptive based on history?
So you can do that. Yes, that can be done. So we did do that for a while. Some of you folks that have been around a while, we used to have the predictive where we would extrapolate, the values forward. And this was done a few years ago. I think Ramin may have still been involved, where that's when we were saying that, based on extrapolating those curves forward by 2028, it would not meet the cleanup levels. I think that's was part of the argument several years ago. But so yeah, we do that on some sites. We'll take those curves and extrapolate them forward. It's not perfect, but it is, it's not designed to be a predictive tool. I mean, let's go straight to those trends here since we're talking about it. I mean, here's the mass in place trend. We could extrapolate that line forward. And the thing is though, mathematically it'll never hit zero because this is a nonlinear trend. It'll be asymptotic by definition. But you can, take this average concentration trend and extrapolate that forward until it hits 0.009 because
Would
it
be
is
worth
decreasing.
considering as an exercise at some point in the future, whether it's next year, a future year, even if it's 5-year intervals, to see, what the next 30 years of this exercise looks like. Now, Mayor Shantz, I know that you had a question as well. Don't want to wait too long before giving you the floor.
It's going down a different rabbit hole, and I don't really need an answer right now, but something to think about. Would it make sense to start monitoring the on-site wells again, just as the off-site plume gets smaller and less concentrated? Would there be any benefit to us to monitor the on-site wells, or does that really not matter as long as we keep monitoring at the edge of the property?
Well, I mean, we know generally what they are because we have to sample the water pre-treatment.
Mhm.
It's more so to help show. I think it's important to show the track where the site is, because there is contaminant mass still in place underneath the site. I think if any gas station has that, any old industry has contamination in place. But at least we can give you an update on that. It's not necessarily useful for us to help with the cleanup because we're keeping that on the property. But this is a very good discussion, and it is where I'm trying to get to. And if we remember Jesse's presentation from June of last year, he talked about that we've come on this aquifer. I might get them mixed up, but the upper municipal, we've come orders of magnitude, one or two in the last 30 years, and we still have one to go. And then another, and that's the way that I guess I'm looking at it. Like, we've come a long way, but we know that the mass that's left is in the hardest to get area. It's the back diffusion. It's stuck in the sediments. And I don't think that the Joe's tool is not going to help us understand that. Is my thoughts, right? He's able to show us where we're going day by day, year by year, but not what mass is left in the harder spots, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. So hopefully I
Too many-
answered some questions.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Heidi, I just not seeing any other questions here. So Joe, if you want to continue.
Okay, I will continue. Thank you, Hadley, for that. That you are correct, though. That the sorbed mass, this tool cannot measure, and that is variable for across sites, across geology, and that's still over 100 hectares out there. It would be very, very difficult for anybody to determine exactly what sorbed mass is, at depth across that entire domain. Is it there? Yes. How much? It is a very difficult exercise. All we know is the rate is getting less and less. That's one thing we can tell for sure. And I say that by looking at these trends. You can see area is on the top. So the plume area was 400 hectares initially, and you can see it's come down significantly to just above 100. Average concentration, same thing, above 8 ppb, and it's down to 0.3, or very, very low. And then same thing with the mass on the bottom. So we measure these trends, just pointing out lay of the land again. We'll use trend analysis tools to do these analyses of the trend data. And you can see in every case, these are all decreasing trends. We use 2 trend tests, Mann-Kendall and regression. Those are just 2 different standard trend tests is all those are. We're posting the confidence factors, very high confidence, greater than 99% confidence that these are in fact decreasing trends. Honestly, I don't need a trend test here. It's obvious these are decreasing trends. And I've got a couple levels of zoom. If I do one level, we can zoom into this and you can see it's decreasing. One thing I like to do, because a lot of these sites, we do see that, to use the term asymptotic behavior, when these trends get this mass in place, it is common. I've looked at thousands of plumes using these tools, and it is a common phenomenon, especially with pump and treat, types of sites, where that mass in place trend gets flatter and flatter and flatter. And in fact, the most recent years in a lot of sites gets very flat to where there's no trend in the data. And, statistically would be a stable trend. So what I like to do is do a second trend line on the most recent data set. So what we've been doing is taking the last 10 years. So the whole 33-year record, is decreasing trend. But in the last 10 years, and I'll do one more zoom level to see it, 2015 to 2025, in fact, it is still decreasing. The rate is getting less. It is getting flatter still. This is still a nonlinear curve, but notice every successive year is getting less and less and less. So it is continuing to decrease. Statistically, still a very high confidence decreasing trend. So it is not stable in the most recent data. It is in fact still decreasing. Thus, the conclusion in the report that the system effectiveness is still very good. It's still very strong. The plume is actually still decreasing. It is a rare thing to see for a site that's been pumping for this many years, that the mass in place trend continues to have a decreasing trend in the most recent data. A lot of times that mass in place number gets flat and it becomes stable in those years. And that's typically when you start looking at turning things off, is when you have that stable mass in place trend. We've seen that at other Lanxess sites even. But in this case, we still see a decreasing trend in the data, indicating the offsite system is still effective in reducing the mass. Just we can only go so much further to zero. It's very low, but and like I said, it's getting flatter and flatter, but still decreasing in the data. So very strong decreasing trends. That is the high level summary for NDMA in the upper aquifer, is a very strong decreasing trend in these metrics. So hopefully that all makes sense. So this is, again, to continue the evaluation.
Just one moment, Joe, if I
Yes.
can interject. I think
Yes.
there's a question.
Yeah, hi, Joe, it's Tiffany.
Hi.
I just wondered, like, how far off would the back of the envelope calculation be of the total volume pumped times the concentration in that pumped water when you compare, like, when you're looking at the effectiveness of the system, removing mass?
I'm sorry. Are you asking again, going back to comparing mass removed to mass in place reduction?
Just like when you're saying that the system is still effective in removing mass, like I see that too, and
It's effective in reducing the plume. Those are two different
Yeah.
things: removing mass and reducing the plume.
Okay.
If you're detecting anything, it's reducing mass, because there's mass in the recovered water.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I answer the question?
Yeah, like I realize you're comparing the area reduction with concentrations at monitoring points, basically, right?
Say that again. Sorry.
When you say reducing the plume, that it's effective in reducing the plume,
Yes.
you mean the area of the plume?
Well, I guess it's the volume of the plume.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yes. So the aerial extent is decreasing, and then the average concentration is still decreasing. We combine these two metrics to get a mass estimate. So the overall mass is continuing to decrease. So the mass in place, based on the data, is decreasing.
Yeah, okay.
So we look at a decreasing trend in mass. That's happening from probably most likely one of two primary mechanisms. It's either anthropogenic, which we have. There's a system pulling mass out. That's likely the reason for it. In some cases, it could be intrinsic. We have natural, degradation causing that mass in place to decrease. That can only be assessed in a non-pumping condition. I'm not suggesting that here, but based on the fact that you have a pumping system, the data strongly support that that's the reason that we continue to see a decreasing trend. So that's what I
think
when
some
I
of the
when I say
special-
the system's effective.
Yeah, some of the special studies that have been going on last summer,
Mhm.
are trying to get at some of that data, I believe,
Yes.
Hadley, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. And more.
Okay.
I think we have more studies to do.
yeah,
Yep. Okay. So yeah, I hope that answered, but again, just from a straight standard, plume stability, the plume is clearly decreasing still, I think is the main takeaway. And there's more data for that. So and you guys, if you've seen this, you'll know that. So other lines of evidence, I won't spend again a lot of time on this, but another line of evidence is the center of mass of the plume. And just in a very, very basic sense, if you had an increasing plume that was growing, it would make sense that the center of mass would be moving or migrating, consistently in a down gradient direction if the plume was in fact growing in that direction. And that's not always the case, but that could be the case. And so that's what we look at. So again, all the centers of mass are posted on this graphic. They're color coded. Darker colors are early data, lighter colors are more recent data. And you can just get a general sense, just follow the colors, right? It's a general migration to the north, to the east, and over time, a net migration of the center of mass back towards the site. It's only about 100 meters. It's not real far, but it does seem to be an up gradient shift or migration over time in the center of mass. So that's point number one, indicating a stable plume or decreasing plume. Number two, as we look at this diagram on the right, if you can imagine center of mass is at a single location for a given event. At the next sampling event, it's at a different location. We just connect those two events with an arrow, and that can be represented mathematically as a vector. And so if we plot all those vector movements, just tie the tails together, you can see the movements are all over the place. Sometimes it goes north, sometimes it goes south, sometimes it goes west, it goes east, it goes all different direction. So the more scatter you see in a plot like this indicates that the center of mass migration is erratic. It's not always the same direction. Again, back to my point, if it was always going in the same direction, if it was always moving down gradient per se, a lot of these vectors would then line up in the same quadrant. That might be an indication, of a plume that is migrating in a given direction. The more scatter you see in a plot like this, the more it speaks to stability. So it's more of a secondary metric. In this case, we really don't even need it because the primary plume data are so strong. It is clearly decreasing. It's obvious in the data, but this also just verifies that. It corroborates the first line of evidence of a stable plume. And then the last thing we'll do for every one of these plumes is we do what's called a spatial change indicator. So what we're doing here is we're comparing each plume map to the baseline condition. So 1993 is the baseline. This is what the plume looked like, this top left plume. 1994, the very next year, in the bottom left corner. And rather than just comparing them side by side and making qualitative comparisons, we're going to subtract each plume from the baseline. And when I do that, we can look for spatial differences between them. And that resultant, if you will, is what this plume on the right is. It's just two colors, red and blue. And what it illustrates is anywhere that concentrations increase from the baseline show up over here as a reddish color. Anywhere that concentrations decrease from the baseline show up over here as a bluish color. So what it shows, anywhere that's blue is a decrease from the baseline. Anywhere that's red is an increase from the baseline condition. And the gradational shading is just the relative extent. So darker red means more increase, darker blue means more decrease. And when I play the video, it just lets you see, effectiveness of remediation by how much does it get bluer and bluer, indicating attenuation or decrease, or do we see areas of sourcing or increases? Do we see areas of red that get more red as time goes on? And that is a phenomenon, by the way, of, like I said, I've looked at thousands of plumes in this manner. Very, very few plumes are all decreasing or all increasing. What in fact happens is parts of a plume increase, parts of it decrease. It changes over time. You get erratic readings. This is the way nature works. And so the net, though, is the main thing. And that's what we can see on the top of this more quantitative metrics. We can evaluate the amount of change in area concentration mass on a percent basis, as well as the magnitude of change. So we can calculate how much mass increase. So in this area of red, it's 17 kilograms of increase. All these areas in blue, we can quantify that 20 kilograms of decrease. That's just 94 compared to 93. So there should in fact be a 3% net decrease in the mass, even though parts of the plume increased and parts decreased. I hope that makes sense, because we'll do this now for every single event. So when I play the video here, we can see as time goes on, we do see that evolution of blue, lots of dark blue. Where the plume exists is getting less and less. It gets darker and darker. Where the dark blue is, this outer peripheral area, the plume no longer exists. And you can check that against the graphic. 93 was way out here. We don't see that in 2025. The dark blue is where the plume no longer exists. The green boundary is the current, evaluated boundary of the 2025 plume. But even within that plume boundary, almost everywhere within this boundary is blue, and the darkest blue is right here in the core of the plume, indicating the most decrease. And so we see a little bit of pink down here at E79, indicating that part of the plume has increased from 1993. And to help illustrate or understand that a little bit deeper, we'll even put in some well charts. So I brought in these well by well charts that we can look at. And just so you know, on this view that we're looking at, these charts are all on the same scale. So these are all, the Y scale here is 140 micrograms per liter. So you can see some wells are much higher concentration historically than others. For example, CH33B, was really, really high here. W3 was really high, and W6B out here is, you can't even see the trend hardly relative to each other. So to look at these closer, you can simply click on those charts. So I'll start at the top here, and if I click on CH33B, it's going to zoom into that particular well. And you can see historically it was 542 micrograms per liter. We're not posted, we're just starting at 100 here, but you can see it has decreased substantially over time. If I zoom in, it's less than 0.5 micrograms per liter, still above 0.009, but has decreased to Hadley's point by orders of magnitude. You can see that in the data right in the middle of the plume. And we can see W3 and its replacement well 3R. I can click on that. And you can see it was about 120 initially, has decreased substantially. I can zoom in on that one as well. W3R takes over in about 2016 or 2015. It continues to decrease. So we're here in 2025. It's again about a 0.4 ppb, still above the baseline standard of 9 parts per trillion, but clearly decreasing. So if I come down to this E79 that appears to be an area of pink, when I click on this, a lot of that reason is it's pretty low concentration, in the data here. Just so you know, the open circle denotes a non-detect. The well, that particular well, we don't have any data in 93. We have data in 1991, and we have data in 1999 of a non-detect. So we're just interpolating between. In 93, it's a very, very, very low baseline condition. That's why it has that pink, because the most recent value out here, I think, it doesn't zoom in. I thought it did. This most recent value is, it's like 0.07, I think, which is still above the cleanup, but it's a very low number, but it's still higher than what this is practically near zero, 93. So it looks like a slight increase, but in fact, we've seen NDMA is as high as 3.5, as high as 2 historically, but in the last 20 years, it's been pretty much below 0.2. It's been very low and just tends to stay in that level. It's not increasing at all, even though it shows a bit of an increase from this baseline condition out here. I hope that kind of makes sense. I'll just hit a couple more of these. We don't have to hit all of these, but W5B, you can see was 40, came down. This is probably an anomalous value out here, I'm assuming, because the data since then has been very low and continues to decrease as well. If I zoom in on it, these values are all less than 0.1 in W5B. So clearly the concentrations are still going down. I'll look at W6B out here, was installed 2015. Initially, not uncommon, by the way, for extraction wells when they get installed, they tend to increase for a period, and then you'll get that balance where that it starts to decrease, and that's I think what we're seeing here. It's been decreasing since 2021 to less than 0.5, about a 0.3 in that well. So again, just to give a little more clarity in the data, these charts can be done for any number of wells. We just post the ones that seem to make sense. So that's what we're doing. We'll do the same thing. I'll go a lot faster for the others, but we do it for the other constituents in each zone. So if there's any questions, I'll take the questions and maybe what direction do you guys want to go? Do you want to look at chlorobenzene in the upper, or do you want to go to NDMA in the lower? Some people have different preferences. I'm fine either way. Is there a preference by anybody?
Or against anything?
Say again.
How about chlorobenzene in the lower?
The lower?
Yeah, chlorobenzene in the lower.
We can do that. So so the way I present it is going to be identical though. So all right, I just clicked on chlorobenzene in the lower. So chlorobenzene lower, municipal aquifer, back in 1993, it was just in a couple wells out here. And you can see it's just 9 hectares, pretty low area, 54 kilograms. And then I'll just play it and we can. So some of those wells you can see get installed as time goes on. And so we're ending here, 17 kilograms, 6.7 hectares. And then if we look at the trends and the chlorobenzene, again, if I go to the first one, sorry, I'm gonna go back to the beginning of this. There was a well network change that changed the way it looks. So, gosh, 93, I'm gonna go forward one event. You can see a lot of wells get installed in here, so it really changes the way it looks. So we're starting our trends in this case from 1994, when this area gets bigger, when all those wells get installed in there. So we're starting our trend from 1994 now. So just over 100 kilograms here. And you can see over time, some wells do get installed and some wells, go hanging in this period. But for the most part, it comes up a little bit. Offsite system started 98, but you can see it's been variable, decreasing over time. And in every case, all very high confidence, decreasing trends. And then again, if we look at the most recent 10-year period, it's still a decreasing trend statistically with high confidence, even in the last 10 years. And I'll also point out that the 2025 value is historically the lowest value of all of these as well. So indicating the chlorobenzene plume in the lower is also decreasing, continuing to go down. So I just zoomed in there and you can see that lower value there. Center of mass for chlorobenzene in the lower, you can see it's about 500 meters, in the upgrading direction. Clearly there's a shift, and that makes sense. The plume, when I look at the spatial change, you'll see it. It does kind of migrate in this direction. You can see it. Some of that is because wells do get installed that tend to show up in the middle of the plume. So we'll see it in this graphic here, the spatial change indicator. So again, 1994, this jelly bean shape, snowman, whatever plume. 90, the next event is a 96 actually. And you can see it looks like an increase just of those two events. And when I play this, you can see these wells start to decrease, and we see wells get installed out here. And this is all increased out in here. Now, interestingly enough, these are all increased from the baseline. You know, in 1994, we don't see a real plume out here. In 2025, we do see this out here, but some of these wells were installed. Had they been installed in 1994, they probably would have had values, and you can see that when we look at the well trends out here. So again, these well by well trends for chlorobenzene, these are all on the same scale, 2,500 in this case parts per billion. Just so you know, the plume boundary in this case is 80 micrograms per liter for chlorobenzene. That first well, that CH38A out here in the middle was, you know, initially, if I click on that, was over 2,000 ppb, has come down substantially. And we can see it's, you know, it's, if I zoom in on it, it's been below 80 for the last, you know, few events. So it's below the base contour of 80 or the cleanup level of 80. It's down to less than 50 now in that well. So that's why it's all dark blue. The plume doesn't exist out here anymore. If we go to these wells in the middle where the, you know, where it's all increased from the baseline, you know, interestingly enough, you know, I'll start in this most up gradient well or down gradient well here, CH43D. If I click on that, sure enough, 93 or 94, it wasn't sampled, but it's, you know, but that date is between two non-detect events. So it was most likely non-detect. Clearly has increased. It came up, it went down. It seems to have peaked in about 2014, though, at about 350 or 330 or so parts per billion. But since 2015, this well is only sampled every 2 years, but you can see it's been coming down. You know, based on the data, it does appear to be decreasing. So the way I would characterize that well is it's increased from the baseline, but it is not increasing. I know that almost sounds like an oxymoron, but that's the way to characterize this. It's actually decreasing from its historical high in 2015. So it's increased from this baseline, but decreasing in that regard. And we see that same phenomenon. Look at 70D up here. This well wasn't installed yet in 94. So anything in there is going to look like an increase. So in fact, 2025, it is increased from, you know, there's no well, so that it probably had no values in there. It did come up to about 2,000, but since 2006, this well has exhibited a very strong decreasing trend. So again, it's increased from the baseline, but it's not increasing. In fact, you can see it is decreasing. If we come up to OW 171-38, again, this well was installed in the later years. It was installed in 2014, was not installed yet in 94. So it does come in above that base contour of 80, but since it's been installed, you can see it's been decreasing. You know, in almost every case. Its lowest value is 2025 value. This is I think that this is explainable here. Remember what I said, when extraction wells get installed, they tend to increase for a period and then they'll start decreasing at some point. If I look at W5, it wasn't installed yet, but the first value was non-detect, and it does seem to be on a steady increase. And that does make sense for an extraction well. If it wasn't doing that, I would kind of question the location. The reason you put an extraction well is to recover mass. So the fact that this is increasing is kind of an expected pattern. However, 2019 or so, it does seem to have peaked, and we're starting to see it now decrease as well. So it's less than 200, but it is appearing to be on a decreasing trend as well. And if we look at the well just up gradient of that CH69A, we see a similar phenomenon. Was very low level, starts to come up about 2002, has been increasing. It seems to have peaked in about 2014, and it is also now on a decline. I expect that will continue as well. And I can imagine, you know, what used to be over here was likely influenced by pumping wells. This well has increased, and I think what we're seeing is this dissolved mass migrating to that well, and as it cleans up, we're going to start seeing these decreasing trends in all these wells. That's, again, I don't know that for sure, but based on seeing a lot of sites like this, that's probably what's going to happen. This will continue to decrease as time goes on. The one well I didn't look at is this one up here. OW 61-34 was non-detect historically. Last year, we only had one value and it was above 600. And we're like, oh no. The well was sampled in 2025. It did come down to less than 250, so certainly has increased from its baseline. I don't know that it's increasing. There's just not enough data yet. Doesn't appear to be. Seems to be decreasing as well. But the wells around it are clean or below base contour, but certainly a bit of an increase. So I hope that makes sense for chlorobenzene in the lower. Any questions on that analysis?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just a point of observation, it's just that it's interesting that some of these wells, when you put them in, see an increase in these amounts over a short period, but some over a very long period. And I wonder if there's any logic there at all to tell us why ones would be, let's say, a 2-year span before they peak, whereas others, it seems like it was 15 years before they peak. Is there any sort of logic that explains that?
Honestly, I have not tried to discern that, why that is. It's a good observation. I'd have to think about that. They do seem to be in step here. If I look at 69A, you can see that increase seems to line up with 43D. These seem to be very similar. Unfortunately, the 17138 just doesn't have enough historical. This could have also had a peak back here. We just don't know. Yeah, I'm just looking at this. Yeah, I'm not sure. Not prepared to to speak to that, I guess.
Well, it could just be the location. I mean, and that's a little fortuitous, a little bit of a chance situation there, but there might be a more rational reason for things peaking earlier rather than later, or vice versa.
Yeah, it is. 38A peaked clearly and has decreased substantially. Same thing in 70D. Both of these wells have peaked at very high values, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. But your general point is well taken, Joe. I mean, the trend clearly is downward, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, clearly it's there, but I do believe it is, and again, it gets back to the point I've made in the report that the effectiveness, there's probably some intrinsic component to this, but the system as it is, as installed, is effective in reducing the mass in place, just based on the empirical observation that the plumes are decreasing. So yeah, that's chlorobenzene in the lower. I guess we can do chlorobenzene. We'll go backwards in the upper. Is that fair? Or
Yeah.
all right. So we'll chlorobenzene in the upper is the very first event, same thing. The 93 event, it changes in 94. So we're gonna, this first event, 1,600 kilograms, pretty high value. If I go forward one event, I'm just gonna do it manually here. Whoops. Right in 1994, these wells go down, but also more wells get installed out here. So you can see wells get installed out here. So we're going to use 94 as our baseline. So this is the baseline condition, 288 kilograms. So higher magnitude, 25 hectares in this case. And so when I play it forward from 1994, we'll see how this one behaves. And in this case, you saw the center of mass move down gradient, but not because the plume was moving, is because the plume up gradient essentially disappears. These wells are all below 80. They're either non-detect or below 80, all these wells up here that are black. So the plume is really gone up in this part of the site, in the upper. And so, again, if you look at the trends, very strong, since 1994, 300 kilograms. We come to the end here, about 10. So pretty significant reduction. And again, the last 10 years, it is still a decreasing trend. So with chlorobenzene in the upper, it is a little flatter. This does seem to be flatter than what we saw in the lower, at least, but it is still decreasing. This most recent event, 2025, is in this case also the lowest historical event, but of all the mass data. So the center of mass in this case, this is one that doesn't follow the norm. Like I said earlier, this is a down gradient trend, but we explained that because what the plume that used to be up gradient is gone, and it only exists down here. So the plume isn't migrating. You'll see that when we look at the spatial change indicator. So when I come back to this view, 94 is the baseline. We'll compare every event to that baseline, and you can see what's going on in this case. So lots of dark blue up here, lots of attenuation. Like I said, the plume is completely gone up here. It's just in one well right here, a little bit, but it has decreased from the baseline. And then these wells have increased as well. So to help again evaluate that, we can pull in just a couple well charts. If I look at OW 119.27 from 94, it was non-detect. It's been pretty variable. This is as high as 250. It's been below 80 every event in here. This is the first time that well is above 80, still less than 100 though. So it's slightly above that base contour of 80. Hasn't been sampled in many years, but you can see the data we have for it. And then this was I know was a concern last year as well, because last year we didn't have any data for it, but in 2023 it was sampled and it was at 300. And no doubt, 4 events here clearly increased over that period of time, was sampled again in 2025, and it does not appear to be continuing. At least it has come down to 250. I'm not saying it's stabilized or coming down. We need more data to assess that, but it does appear, it's not continuing to increase, at least. Certainly something to keep an eye on. But even with that, we see 84% decrease in area and 96% decrease in mass, even though parts of the plume did it. So this area that's increased, about 9 kilograms of increase, but we have 287 kilograms of decrease all through here. So the net is still a very strong decrease overall, but the plume only exists essentially in this part of the site.
We have a question for you, Joe.
Sure.
Yeah,
Chance?
thanks, and I might have asked this question in another year, but I'm gonna ask it again because I don't remember the answer. What would we attribute the increased concentration in that area to? Like, do we know, or do we have some assumptions?
This is the area that I think we suspect there's another source. And Lanxess's job is not to identify sources, right? So this is part of our network. We're sampling it. We're following along as if it's ours, but that's our suspicion. Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is there any way for us to be certain that this may not migrate further south? If it is Lanxess source, I mean, if it's not, presumably if we were to test further south, we shouldn't be getting any hits.
But we are testing. I mean, I don't know if you can play. Are those all the wells? Are there any others to the south?
This is it. There has no other wells to the south are sampled for chlorobenzene. We don't have data.
Okay.
So
we
yeah,
could add that. We can look at adding it. But I mean, we're pumping, so we do know that the aquifer is constrained by the pumping. Mm-hmm. So I don't anticipate a lot of migration.
Thank you.
Sure. Yep. So yeah, that's chlorobenzene. Again, also, even with very strong decreasing trend overall. So we'll come over to NDMA in the lower. And again, in the lower, the wells are more spread out. So we've posted at least the well names on these data. So I'll just let this play. This is our baseline event. And you can see it is decreasing. The colors are getting lighter as time goes on. And some wells do go hanging, indicating they stopped being sampled. But at the end of this, excuse me, we're down to 3 kilograms. So still, higher magnitude than what we saw in the upper. It's still 200 hectares aerial extent. And then again, these are areas that we've based off existing, hydrogeology, CSM, where the areas where the aquifer doesn't exist. But we look at the trend data, pretty strong decreasing trends as well. Overall, 93 to 2025, all very strong decreasing trends. And then the same thing, if we zoom in over the last 10 years, interestingly enough, NDMA in the lower, this trend line actually is linear. So, forget what I said about, in the last, 5 years, this is almost a linear, still decreasing trend. So, something, it could be a short-term phenomenon, I don't know, but it does appear to be a very strong decrease. And again, the historically lowest value is in 2025, which is always a good thing. You always want to see continued decrease. I don't ever get excited when we do see an increase, because it's, a lot of times it does go up, then it goes down, goes up, goes down. That's a common phenomenon. But we do see a pretty strong decreasing trend, even in the most recent 10 years for NDMA in the lower zone. So again, it gets back to my point that, the effectiveness is very good. The system is effective in reducing the plumes, because clearly the data support that the plumes are reducing. The center of mass for NDMA in the lower also exhibits that up gradient, migration pattern. You can see it's been as far pretty close up here, has come back down, but a lot of scatter. Again, don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the data do support stable trend. And then we'll do the spatial change indicator in the lower zone. Again, 93 is the baseline on the top. And when we play this, what we like to see is that area of blue indicating attenuation, and areas of red would indicate an increase. So we do see that here. 42% decrease in area, 97% decrease in dissolved mass, 111 kilograms of decrease. It's all gone in the dark blue, lots of decrease. But we do see this 0.38 kilograms of increase. A couple areas of apparent increase in the plume. We've already talked about E79. That well screened in both aquifers, so that's why we include it in both. So I'll put the well charts on here. We've already talked about E79. Before I look at this red area, I do want to point out, 38A, similar to 38B, just a very strong decreasing trend. Very, very strong decreasing trend all the way through 2025. It's less than 0.5, maybe is flattening out here, but lots of decrease in the core of the plume here. If I come over to like W9, it was installed 2015 or so. You can see it's been decreasing ever since. So we have 6A. I'll end on this one. 6A out here. It's in just a very light blue, so just a slight decrease. It was non-detected when installed, but it follows that pattern I was talking about. It did increase for a period, only to 0.7. It never got really high concentration, but it has decreased in recent years, and it seems to be decreasing actually. And then we come up to CH88B, and it does look like an increase from the baseline, and it does look like a real increase. So in 94, that well was, or 93, 94, the well, there was no samples, but you can see it was pretty low either way if we interpolate between the two known values. Since 2005, it did appear to be increasing. The well was replaced 2018, but from 2018 forward, it seems to have peaked in 20. It seems, I think this well sampled biennially also. In 2023, it peaked out about 48 parts per billion. 2025 came back down to 30. So I wouldn't say it's decreasing. Honestly, I think this well clearly is an increase. More data can continue to evaluate that trend. It's kind of like that other well I've mentioned. I think it's something to look at and keep an eye on, but it is very near the site. Everything down gradient from that well has decreased from the baseline substantially in the middle of the plume. So I don't see it as a big concern, but it is a small area of increase in the NDMA lower zone. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a lot of the data we have. 5A, I forgot this one. If we look at 5A, interestingly enough, in this well, extraction well, it's been decreasing ever since it was installed. So a very strong decreasing trend. And you can see it's, I think there's a zoomed in, it's down to less than 1, about a 0.5 in W5A as well. So this well has decreased substantially, even though it looks like an increase because it wasn't installed yet in 94. But in fact, it's very strongly decreasing. So this area is likely decreased. This is an artifact of, the initial interpolation in this part of the site, there was no well there. And then even the low concentration we have now looks like an increase, even though likely it wasn't, the well just wasn't installed yet. So this is an artifact, but this does appear to be real. It is increasing in this part, in this well. But we do have an extraction well immediately down gradient that is undergoing a very strongly decreasing trend. So yeah, that's everything that I looked at. That's all in the report, but hopefully that made some sense on how the data are displayed. That's everything I have to show. If you have any questions or comments, I can certainly answer those.
Unfortunately, I don't think we got the PowerPoint version of this. We got the PDF report version, but it would be really great to get the PowerPoint file as well.
The PowerPoint was sent. I know that Amy with GHD sent a link that should have taken everybody that was a recipient at least. Should have gotten the PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll take a double check there. If not, I can send it. Yeah, it was circulated.
And I think Alex has it. I think you were able to see it and play it.
Yeah, I only got the PDF. Yeah, it's
Okay,
downloaded.
we'll make sure everybody has it. There's a
Yeah,
lot that goes
it's
out right
available.
now with the annual report. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So you can chew
I'll
on it.
follow up if I need it, but I'm sure it's here. It wouldn't play like that. Yeah, that's.
Are there any other questions?
Like bells and whistles.
Sebastian?
Yeah, just the amount of data that's required in all of this. I have to commend you for making sense of all of this. I'm just wondering how many computers went down because of all the data that you packed on.
No, it's kind of routine. We have a site that has over 600 wells with data back to 1958, and
Wow.
it runs. It's a Department of Energy site. It's a federal site. It's a big one, but and it seems to run okay.
No, but the kudos I think go to Joe because he was able to figure out how to show the data in this manner, right? And it is very useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we have another question here, Susan.
Yes, it's, I think I may have misunderstood, but I thought you said at the beginning of the presentation that you were going to have them do the on-site wells, subject it to this kind of analysis.
Yes, exactly. So it's not for this meeting. We need to sample them. We plan to sample them in July, and then we'll try to see if we can squeeze it in towards one of the later meetings of this year or early next year.
But there are so many hanging wells on the
Well,
site.
we're going to sample them. So it won't be a full data set because they weren't sampled for about 4 or 5 years. Ramin made the decision to stop and I think it's time to sample them. So it'll be,
yeah. Okay,
yeah, it'll show from the 90s until current.
That's a very good point. So I can explain a little bit. So we have good data, and we did it for many years actually with the on-site. And so I'm showing off-site characteristics. It's kind of neat when we do this. We'll have a separate box here that'll say on-site versus. You can see how on-site compares to off-site, and the two together will be the total, right? And so we have good data historically. And when I drag this forward, some of these wells that are hanging, we can fill those right here when they all go hanging. So we have good data in 2019, but what we can do is we'll have new data in 2026, and then we can interpolate to fill in those values. Remember how some of those wells we interpolate values in between? We have a really strong algorithm that helps us fill values for those. So we'll have plume maps still but even at the very least, even if we have to make a jump, we'll have good data through 2019. So we've got a really strong on-site analysis through 2019, and then we may just have to jump straight to 2026, like a 5-year gap. but at least, you know, we can, to have these point, we can start making those comparisons. And, you know, even if you sample those wells every 2 or 3 years, even, you know, it's, you know, it lets you have some kind of comparison over time.
And Susan, did that answer your question?
Yes, just another question. Would you include the shallow aquifer in the on-site?
Yes, I think
That's
so.
the
There's not a
aquifer
lot
that-
of data there.
Yeah,
We'll look to-
we've never done the shallow. We've never done any analysis in that. We've just always done the municipal aquifer.
Right, but the shallow aquifer on the site flows into the creek.
Yes, we've never done any analysis for those wells.
It would be interesting.
We'll look at it and see if we can.
Yeah.
And if everything is contained on the site now, then from the point where we have containment and monitoring sentinel wells that tell us that it's contained, there shouldn't be much change in the concentrations on the site. Is that correct?
Theoretically.
You're-
I always like to
Pulling
see
them
real
for
data.
treatment. Yeah, so let's see what the data says. I'll see what we can do for the shallow wells. But I mean, we are pumping those for treatment, so we should see a reduction.
Natalie, if I
some
can,
of
we do.
of the the creek bank on the site is being pumped. The rest of it flows in.
So,
the rest of the aquifer flows into the creek.
but Sue, in the areas that we don't have, like that aren't in the southwest portion of the site, like so on the east side, we sample creek bank wells in the UA. Those are in the AMR report. And then as Hadley had indicated previously, we do monitor like the influent concentrations from UA wells, and we have that data, and that's in the AMR as well. And when we look at that, concentrations over time are down. Concentrations are reducing even on site in the upper aquifer. So the wells that you're concerned with and um, are along, we call them the creek bank monitoring wells. That data is in the AMR. So you should see that, and you can look that up. And then I also believe the influent concentrations for every year are also there. We do have that data for the whole project, so we can trend that as well. But I believe that'll show a strong reduction in on-site concentrations as well.
Thank you.
Yes, no, good point. I have one more item to talk about with Joe on the call still. So Jason brought up, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but do we need to do this level of detail every year and make part of the annual report? And because it costs money, right? And I think the answer is no, we don't, because we're seeing these trends. We have a good baseline. So I bet I'm assuming that you won't see Joe next year, but you'll see him in 2028. So we're thankful for everything that he does, but we're going to reduce the amount of times that we go through the model moving forward. Not model, excuse me, the analysis.
No, it's a good point, Hadley, and we do that on especially mature sites that have great trends. You know, you're sampling a lot of your network biennially anyway, so just do the updates on those biennial sampling events. Yes. I agree. I don't disagree with that at all. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
So any updates to those on-site examinations that you do would come in the 28 report then?
We'll do the update for the on-site this year and see how we present it in the AMR and decide if we're going to. I'm talking about off-site, so we're going to reduce how often we do the off-site analysis. We'll make decisions based on on-site based on what we see. Right? There's not a requirement for us to do the on-site. It's more so just to provide information to the track.
Yep. Sebastian?
Could I just make an observation or a suggestion here that should the trends be not what we think they are, but there might be some change in the 26 results. If that could be made known to us in 27, that would, I think, be appreciated rather than wait till 28.
Understood.
So
If there's any surprises, we'll still do the AMR.
some discretion, that's all I'm asking.
Okay. Fair point.
Yeah,
Is there anything
just to
online?
clarify, there's going to be no changes to sampling requirements and the monitoring programs, the monthly progress reports, the annual monitoring reports. That's all happening. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Jason. Are there any other questions online? Not seeing any. All right, well, thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate your time. Appreciate taking the effort to put this together. It is really helpful.
Thank you. Yep,
Yes,
absolutely.
thank you.
Any questions? Let me. I mean, you can go through Hadley or contact me directly. I'm fine either way. But yeah, I can. Any questions? Let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to item 5.2, Hadley. I think that one's yours as well.
I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda up. I have too many
It's
screens.
drinking water standards, treatment of
That-
effluent concentrations from February 19th meeting follow-up.
I don't know if you can present that, Alex, or not, or if you want me to try. So it was really just to show everyone, because the question was raised, how are we treated to drinking water standards and for the effluent that we send to the creek? And the answer is we are. We're meeting them for the criteria that we sample for, NDMA, chlorobenzene.
Right,
And
and you
I
spoke
just
to that, didn't you? Yeah, thank you. That brings us to item 6, unless there's any questions on that. No. All right, item 6 is the 2028 order deadline. So I know that there has been a lot of work going on behind the scenes with Lanxess and township staff talking about the communication plan that they're going to bring forward. So excited about that, what that looks like. Strategies not quite where it needs to be in order for it to be presented here though. So looking forward to seeing what that looks like. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Hadley. I'm not sure who all was involved in those conversations between you and the town, but I know it has been started, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the progress.
We talked about the survey at the last meeting, and the decision was really to hold off, and the decision was made by Woolwich, not by Lanxess, to wait till later in the year, because there's so much going on right now with water in the region, and to the point that a lot of you all made, it will start to get conflated. So we were hoping to try to separate the two by giving it a little bit more time. So we don't, because I thought I would have the survey out by now. So we're going to wait on it. I think it makes sense. I see some heads nodding. Hopefully this for the same reason. But we do plan to do the survey, but it will be later in the year. And that's to find our population size. And we're working with Woolwich. We've had some really good discussions. I think it's Jeff and Rayanne and Alex on our strategy, and we're trying to iron that out. So we plan to have, based on the population size and their interest from the survey, what type of communication do they want? Is it emails? Is it just updates? Is it presentations that they can watch? Is it open houses where you can ask questions? Is a little bit of all of those. So we hope to have that happening then for 2027. We move forward with our remedial alternatives and a discussion on the alternatives and gaining community input on those alternatives and their thoughts, so that we can present that in our report to the ministry. You know, what does the community want? What do they feel? What do they care about? Their thoughts. And then having that through 2027 in order for our submittal in 2028.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Hadley. Maybe you should have a comment or.
I was just gonna say that the key thing that Hadley mentioned there is a strategy. And so that's what's being worked on, right? It is the overall strategy so that it's not piecemeal. And we don't get the survey fatigue that Sebastian raised at our last meeting.
Have any questions, Susan?
I don't, this just occurred to me, maybe it's. So the control order, the original control order doesn't mention the creek. Might the new one mention the creek or have some specifications about that? Or will it just be the matter of the aquifers?
I think Jason, you might have to handle that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
At this time, we're talking theoretical here because we haven't even landed on seeing a proposal for a new remedial action plan. So that could be an option if it's warranted, of course. We don't
Right.
even know at this time because at this time we still have a draft risk assessment that's saying there's no risk.
Yeah.
So the ongoing evaluations are going to have to lead to an update to a risk assessment, and then we're going to have to evaluate what those conclusions are in the future. If it's showing potential risks to human health or wildlife, then ecological receptors, then it's going to be up to Lanxess to determine what the risk mitigation measures will be and implement them. So we don't know if what's going to be warranted in relation to a compliance instrument for the creek at this time. So we still need some more work to be done.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm turning my camera off because I'm having bandwidth issues, but it could even be two different ECAs because that's where
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I see your point, Susan, that the current ECA and everything we're doing with we're sampling the creek and the discharge for how it affects the creek, but it's not necessarily about the risk assessment. It's not about the dioxins and furans. So I personally think it's two different instruments that we need or something or two different parts because the ECA is so specific to groundwater. Or we get through this risk assessment and we see the outcome and maybe we do what is the outcome to some remediation and it may not even be needed.
Correct.
Right.
So, and
Yep.
if you want, I don't know if there's other questions. Sorry, I don't want to keep talking.
It's fine. Thank you.
Let's see.
I can give you a quick update though on the creek if that's okay right now since we're talking about it. We are working on the data summary report. We hope to have it to the agents, to the ministry early in April, and we're not quite there. We've had to do some refinement on the data, but we still think we're spending the right time on it. It's taking longer than we expected, but it's partially because we've got so many great reports, right? And we appreciate that. We appreciate the ministry's reports. We appreciate Susan's reports because this is the first time that all that data has been collated together. And it's giving us a good picture of where things are in time and then also in space along the creek in order to compare and in order to understand, are there areas that we need to do further sampling on? So I think it's a good effort. It's taking longer. We're very close to having it submitted to the agency. And then the decisions will be with the ministry on, do we work with the risk assessment or do we wait till we have their comments on the data summary report? It's probably a happy medium where we'll start some parts of it because it really gives a fulsome view of the data that we haven't had before.
Yes. Thank you.
And if you recall, the ministry had several concerns with the previous version of the draft risk assessment in relation to data quality and the evaluations that were performed on the data that we do have. So going through this, I fully appreciate that this is taking longer, but it's a worthwhile exercise to, like, this will be the first time that we actually will have a database for pretty much all studies done on that creek. And the first, what was the oldest one that I found back in the early 60s or something like that?
Yeah.
So having the data in one spot, in one database, and then having this new consultant reevaluate all the data, because as you recall, the ministry had questions around, are you actually using all the data sets that are available? And that couldn't be clearly answered. So now we are dealing with the complete data set, but it has taken some extra time. to get through. Now that they have that, we're waiting to see their next submission will be the evaluation of that data. And then from there, we'll be looking for next steps. For example, has this exercise identified data gaps that need to be resolved through further sampling on select locations in the creek? We don't know, but that may be one next step. And then followed up with an updated risk assessment.
Yep.
So
And the
who's
next
doing-
meeting, Integral will present the data summary report that they've been working on, and how, because it has really robust figures that everybody will be able to kind of work with and manipulate on their own. So they'll present how to play with those, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry, Tiffany, I interrupted.
No, that was Susan. Oh,
Oh,
I
Susan,
interrupted.
okay.
So was it, so who will do the evaluation of the data? You said someone new or some new?
I've moved to Integral, so that's who presented last year. Jen Lindell, was
Right,
it?
so
Yeah.
they're assembling the data and then
Right.
there's the evaluation of the data.
And it will still be them. It will still be that group. They'll be doing any data, we might use GHD for the collection, I don't know. They have more folks in the area to complete the sampling if we need to do more sampling. But Integral will be the ones manipulating the data and reviewing it and then working on the risk assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions with regards to item 6? Seeing none, we'll move on to other business. So topics to report to council. Tiffany.
Yeah.
Could I
Yeah.
just interrupt? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
A point of order, Nathan. We've been given a report by Joe Ricker and WSB, but the annual monitoring report also contains some information for a report from Alan Deal at GHD. We've not talked about that at all. Are we going to be able to do that today, or is that going to be postponed?
Should.
Do you have questions, or did you want a formal presentation on the AMR?
No, I just have questions. So, but Alan's not with us. Lou is. Would he be able to address a few questions?
Lou and I can try. If
yeah.
not, we can get back to you.
Certainly,
We have
Sebastian.
time for this. That's my question here. Sure, okay. Yeah, I mean, the first 30-odd pages of the annual monitoring report were conducted by Alan. Just a few questions here. One relates to Naples. There was a point by Alan made about Naples. And one of the interesting points that he made was on-site Naples exist, but do not contribute to off-site groundwater imports, quote unquote. Page 2 or 12 or 2 of the report, 12 if you're looking at the entire file here. Can somebody please explain to me how he knows that there are no D Naples or L Naples going off-site?
Well, we're basing that conclusion, Sebastian, on the on-site collection, extraction, and treatment system. It does have a NAPL recovery component to it. We've not seen NAPLs in that system for well over, I think it might be going on 15 years now. We also monitor the wells. We have no indication of free product or NAPLs in the wells that we monitor. But that being said, I believe that the statement speaks to the fact that there could be NAPLs like tied up in and around footings and in some tight soils. We can't discount that. We don't have evidence of those, but we don't know for certain that there aren't any, so we can't make that statement. It's so I think the logical conclusion Alan made is they're likely there, but we don't have any indication or any data to support them other than our theory that they're likely still bound up in some on-site locations and on-site soils. We don't see any indication of NAPLs or free product in the system, in wells that we monitor. And again, we're not seeing any other indications off-site that would also support the conclusion that there's that NAPLs are moving off-site and causing off-site impacts. I mean, I think the one thing that the data does suggest is that the contaminants are being controlled, being reduced, and that the plumes are shrinking. If you had an active ongoing release or source, if NAPLs were leaking into the aquifer still today, I don't think we would. I don't know if Joe's still on the line, but we wouldn't see the results that we're seeing. I don't think that's indicative of the performance of the system and of the data that we have and the record analysis. I'm not sure if Joe's still there, but
Yeah,
again,
I'm here, Lou, and I agree with you completely. Yes.
yeah. So those are the lines of evidence. Those are the multiple lines of evidence that I believe Alan used to make that conclusion and statement.
It just sort of defies belief that, you've got Dean apples on site, but at no point do they cross into the off-site areas and don't do so on a continual basis, just because that's what happens, isn't it? They don't
But I
just
think
stay
we're
on.
also saying we're not seeing measurable DNAPL for 15 years. So that was written with an abundance of caution, right? Being very detailed in the data, but we don't see, when we gauge the wells, we're not seeing NAPL everywhere. We're not seeing it at all. We haven't for years. So we're
No.
saying that conservatively there still could be some, but we have really good containment on site. And to the fact that we haven't seen DNAPL for years. So maybe we can work on writing it a little clearer, because I mean, I can see how it could be taken your way, but we're really not seeing evidence of NAPL either. We're just making the conservative assumption it could still be there.
Right. There are questions about the CTS as well that cropped up repeatedly in that report. At some point, I think Lou can explain this. It doesn't have to be tonight. And it just relates to what extraction wells get into what system, and are the systems for cleaning up the water, are they used for on-site as well as off-site continuously? Is the same process being used? And the one thing that struck me again was E7. When you go to E7, there is a UV process underway as well as oxidation, and then it gets distributed into the landfill creek. So it doesn't, if I understand correctly, it doesn't go through ammonia treatment or any other system. It gets then distributed to landfill creek and then deposited eventually into the Canagibgee Creek. Is that water quality similar to what is done when the CTS is done fully for both on-site and off-site extraction wells, or is it different? And if it's different, why?
So I can answer both of those right now, Sebastian. In every progress report, there's a schematic figure showing all the extraction wells. It's kind of like a little box diagram. I forget the actual figure number, but if you refer to any one of the progress reports that's been submitted, it'll have a schematic showing the complete treatment system, and it'll have representation of wells and which wells go into which systems, and the flow path for each of those flows, and the discharge points for those. So I apologize, I don't have it right in front of me, but if you flip to any one of the progress reports, it's simply kind of laid out in that figure. I believe it's figure 1 in every progress report, but I'm not certain. I don't have it right in front of me. I've looked at it too many times. I think that's my problem. The second part to your or the second answer is that obviously when E7 was assessed, and samples were collected from that well, The determination was made that the only issue at E7, the only COC present in E7 is NDMA. So it only requires the UV treatment process. There's nothing different about the water quality in that well other than, it has NDMA. Other wells have NDMA. If anything, it has some of the lowest concentrations of NDMA we see now currently. And it only requires UV treatment.
Right. There's no
So
chlorobenzene or
yeah,
ammonia in the groundwater at that point.
so it doesn't have to. Yeah, sorry, Hadley, go ahead.
No, so it doesn't need further treatment. And that's what we were discussing at the on-site site walk. And we're happy we can work through that schematic with you and talk about it again on site. But we test the influent, and when the wells were installed, we knew basically what we would need to treat for, and we're only treating for the constituents that they need to be treated for.
Yeah, and that's really a difference in terms of groundwater quality. Otherwise, it would be the same as all the other wells. I mean, it has metals, has dissolved metals. It has all the other inorganics that you normally find in a groundwater, system aquifer such as the one in Elmira. So,
Yeah. Well, let me just follow up with a couple of questions on here. Or the first point here, I don't quite understand why, for instance, you have a whole bunch of extraction wells, offsite extraction wells, and then you put PW6 in with that. To me, why would you do that? I don't understand that. And then these go through a different process on site in different buildings. And then with PW4, you mix that with W3R, and again, you got an onsite and offsite, but they go to different buildings, presumably for the same treatment. But it's just a bit odd that you would mix the extraction wells, on-site as well as off-site, and then going to different sites in the plant itself. Presumably, again, they go through the same process. But I find it just a little technically just a bit odd that you would do that. But my real core question here actually is the second one here with E7, because the standard for that, even if it does do only NDMA, is 0.03. And the standard for everything else is 0.009 micrograms per liter. Why is the E7 site set at a lower level than elsewhere in your system? And remember, that discharges directly into landfill creek, which eventually goes into Kanagudji Creek. So you're presumably allowing higher levels or higher concentrations of NDMA from E7 than you do for the other systems. I'd like to know why that is.
So so E7, first of all, I just okay. Sorry, I want to answer your first question and I'll get to your second one. There's an easy answer for your first question, and that is that the system was built over the span of not like 1 year but many years. So certain things were added as new wells came online, and ultimately, they didn't have one large building to just put all these systems in. That's why we have the different buildings in different locations. And in terms of why certain wells go where, as those wells were added, ultimately it was a treatment system capacity restriction that would have ultimately resulted in the decision to put a well into either a carbon absorber that had additional capacity or a UV treatment system that had additional capacity at the time. So that's kind of how how the system evolved to where it's at, and why it's a little bit, kind of spread out and different things going into different areas. I will say though that the main driving factor is that all wells get treated for everything that they need to be treated for. So what water coming from PW6 goes through all treatment trains. Water coming from PW4 goes through all treatment trains. Water coming from W3R only goes through UV treatment because that's all that's required. Sorry, UV and chlorobenzene, I apologize. So, so that's the driving factor for everything. Everything gets the treatment that it needs, and why you're looking at a system that looks like it does today. In terms of your second question, we operate with the understanding that I don't know where the 0.3 is coming from. That might be an old C of A number, but we treat to the drinking water standard. We want to see the drinking water standard. We want to be below the drinking water standard. That's always the treatment standard. There is no E7 isn't getting by on a higher number. That's if you see that number somewhere, that might be an objective. A lot of times there's an
Maybe send us that language because I
yeah,
can't think
I'm
where you're finding that. So maybe
I'm
it's
I'm not certain that that's correct. And Sebastian, I don't want to like I'd like to see that. I'd like to go through it. E7 has a certificate of approval, but my understanding is and always has been that the effluent discharge requirement is the drinking, at or below the drinking water standard for all of those.
Okay.
And
No,
and that's and quite frankly that's the goal, that Lanxess works towards for all the wells, that we don't have different standards for different wells, or sorry, if we don't have different standards for the same constituent of concern.
Okay. It was mentioned in Alan Dillon's report, a C of A, which pegs it at 0.03 micrograms per liter. And there's at least 2 references to that. And that's, again, it surprised me because that's a lower level or higher amount allowed than is the standard.
I'm wondering if that's an objective or if that's the average influent concentration that's being discussed. But let me go through that and we'll clarify that and make sure that question is
On
answered
page 8 of the
effectively.
report.
Okay.
The condensed report. Page 8 of the condensed report is what I'm hearing. In the interest of time, we're at 7:45, which is does say what time our meeting's supposed to end.
It does.
Wondering, Sebastian, if you had follow-up questions.
Oh, yeah, but I'm not going to monopolize tonight, am I? No.
But it's worthwhile conversation. So if we can get those questions answered, especially for our next meeting, that would be great.
If I could just say, there's a couple of typos, where he mentions the reference for NDMA. Alan's at times has got 1 extra 0 in there. So it's 0.009, should be 0.009, he's got 0.0009 on a couple of occasions, page 15 and 17. That could be updated, please.
Would you mind if you have those maybe in an email? You can send it that way, nothing gets missed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Okay. Thanks for your patience.
CC us.
CC, yeah.
Great. All right, thank you for allowing us to hop back to 5.1, Alex. I'm sure that you don't mind. Anything else on that though before we move forward? Okay, Tiffany, 7.1 off to you.
Yeah, I was just wanting to check with the committee for the biannual presentation to council that's coming up in May. I was going to summarize the contents of February's meeting and today's meeting, and focusing on today's meeting in terms of the annual monitoring report outcomes. Was there anything else that the committee would like to include or felt should be presented to council and emphasized?
I think, given the times, it would be nice to know if we have an idea of the level of the upper municipal, the actual level of it, and whether that's changed over time. Do we have that information? I mean, given the realities of now in the region, we probably should have a pretty good idea for the water level,
In the upper municipal?
well, which is our drawing water.
Yeah, so there's an annual monitoring water level requirement.
Yeah.
And do some basic work. Perhaps GHD has already got that plotted up there. Do you have longer term? I know I can go through the monthly progress reports that include that groundwater elevation sampling, but I just wondered if you had it in Excel.
That's a question for us. Yes, we can work to get that for you.
That'd be great. It would just be helpful not to have to go
Hmm.
annually number by number each of the monitoring
Sure.
events. Great. Anything else? And I'm guessing upper and lower, like the municipal aquifers.
But we get most of our water from the
Yeah.
upper, that's where we've drawn in the past, so.
Okay.
It'd be good if we could, concentrate on that, just to let
Yeah.
people know, has it gone up or down over the last 10 years, 15 years,
And
whatever.
that's under pumping conditions, right?
Correct,
Yes.
correct.
It's not masked with.
Any other thoughts? When it comes to summarizing tonight's meeting, wondering, we will have those visuals from the Ricker's presentation.
Yeah.
The video of the progression.
Yeah, I'm gonna work with Alex to make sure. I opened the file and I didn't see it, so.
Okay, we will make sure that that
Yeah.
happens. That's one thing that
And-
was appreciated.
In the past, what I've done is taken sort of snapshot beginning end and that, blue red, particular presentation piece. Do you think it's necessary to go to the level that tonight's presentation was?
I don't think so. I mean, ideally, I think what council would really appreciate is how Joe just addressed the flag and went from
Yeah.
1993 to 2025. We can
It's,
show
it's
that.
very effective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
really, if we could show those 4 videos, I think that would be a sufficient way to summarize.
yeah, okay.
I just show one.
I think more public maybe to hear there's a conservation plan being developed. I mean, it's fall or next winter, whatever, but public should know that there's gonna be an opportunity to listen, learn and speak.
Any other feedback, feel free to email Tiffany or myself. Make sure that we can add it to that presentation, and as before, we'll circulate in advance of that so that everybody's familiar with what's going to be presented then, and if there is any feedback, we'll solicit it at that point, okay?
Yeah, and objective being that keeping council informed of progress and, oversight.
All right, that brings us to our draft agenda items for 2026 meeting dates. Is there anything that we have to update on this, or are we pretty set for our agenda items moving forward? We're in pretty good shape,
I
right?
think we're in pretty good shape. The plan has always been or was set out in December to speak to the next meeting in June being the risk assessment, integral being the main presentation at the June track meeting. Plus monthly progress report updates.
Very good. Okay, any concern with any agenda items that are on the, what do we call that? Let's just call it a tracker for right now. Okay, just a reminder that Tiffany, Alice and I are meeting before each meeting, just to make sure that the agenda, has been set properly. We're talking about everything we need to be talking about, so if there is anything on your mind, don't hesitate to reach out to us in advance, and we can coordinate that way if you want to get anything added to the agenda. 7.3, consideration of environmental impacts on potential future use of the Elmira Aquifer. And for this one, this is one of those items that's going to be on everybody's mind moving forward, but I think that we have to be very mindful of the terms of reference and what we're here to discuss. I think the long-term goals are to have this aquifer be used. I know that we're far off from that. I think that's, this committee is really interested to know what the plan is going to be at the regional level. Especially given some of the constraints that we've been hearing with water capacity. Now, with all of that being said, the committee was very clear that they wanted to have conversation, we wanted to have dialogue, and we wanted to keep this going with the region. To that end, I have been in contact with David Brenneman, CAO for Woolwich, who has been in correspondence with regional officials to try to identify who the most appropriate person would be to join us for a technical experts meeting, to really have those discussions to go in depth. So that work is still ongoing. Stay tuned for that. I'm very hopeful to have a much more fulsome update at our next meeting in June. That's all I have on the update, and so I'll pass it to the region if there's anything that you want to add.
And sorry, just to clarify, are you asking for updates on potential future use related to the current supply capacity issue, or kind of in isolation?
Well, I mean, if you had those at fingertips, I'm sure we'd hear them, but I don't think that we're expecting you to have those at your fingertips at this moment. I know that a lot of the focus at region has been on short-term measures and really dealing with capacity issues that are in front of us at the moment. I see this as a much longer term item, and so probably makes sense to deal with the pressing matters now. I think that the committee is very mindful that we don't want our aquifer to be forgotten about.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, we know there's a proven quantity of water in the Elmira aquifer. Obviously, given the really complex nature and long history of contamination related to this site, there's a lot that needs to go into any potential future use. So it's definitely not something that, in light of any circumstances that we're going through right now, we're not going to rush into anything for sure with respect to Elmira. It's something that we're not going to forget about. It's something that we're mindful of as the 2028 remedial action plan is being revisited and revised moving forward. But yeah, I appreciate the ongoing consideration of this committee to remembering that this was once a viable supply aquifer for us, and at some point in the future, it would be nice to return it to service safely.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Any other comments, questions? Sebastian?
I'm just wondering if there are some plans that could be adopted to use the water that is normally discharged into the creek. Yeah, yes, it's not potable, okay, but it is still serviceable, might be considered gray water of a sort. I'm thinking about, we've got gravel pits in the neighborhood who have made application for 10 million liters per year of water. Well, they don't need potable water for that. I'm wondering if our discharges from the Lanxess plant couldn't serve that need. How you get it from here to a area where you're doing these aggregates, I don't know, but still it's a possibility. I was thought.
That's an interesting question, because in our discussions with on the aggregate in Beaumont, they indicated that it was a contained pit, so that could they truck it?
I don't know. It seems very wasteful just to throw it into
It
the
does.
creek.
I agree. You've been talking to me.
Linda?
I think we have to be very mindful of source water protection with that. We have issues all the time with gravel pits, monitoring or extracting below the water table, tracking contaminants coming into source water. The fact that it is not potable, as a member of the Source Water Protection Committee at this point in time, I'm a little concerned with that. We'd have to really look at that one too.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of risk with treated water effluent. This is a site with a very, very long history of chemical manufacturing. There is a lot of different chemicals that have been manufactured over the years. And there is always risks with emerging contaminants of concern. So PFAS is one of those emerging contaminants of concern that nobody was really talking about 15 years ago. And there will be more emerging contaminants of concern in the future. So this site, it's a high risk when you're talking about reuse options. I know this suggestion's been thrown around before of on-site non-potable reuse through process for the processed water that Lanxess uses. I know that requires infrastructure upgrades within facilities, so it's not like you can just snap your fingers and make that change. That's recognized. But there's not a lot of on the surface, there's not a lot of reuse options that have no risk or have minimal risk. Particularly with the aggregate situation, most of the I'm just going to assume that water taking is for aggregate washing. That's usually what water taking applications are for, related to aggregate pits. Generally, you don't have a lot of loss of water. You lose a bit to evaporation. The overall water taking, if it's 10 million liters per day, you would return 92% of that water back to the ground. It would soak back into the ground. So the actual consumptive amount of water is much lower than what the permit is. The permit to take water is actually listed for. So I think any reuse of treated effluent, you have to be extremely careful with it for that emerging contaminant concern perspective. And we don't know what the rest of the parameters test for all the other Ontario Drinking Water Standard parameters. It's not sampled for the full suite.
Comments, questions? Anybody online that I'm not seeing? All right, thank you very much for that update. That brings us to item 8, correspondence. So we do have the monthly progress report from February from Lanxess. We also have the 2025 annual monitoring reports. One thing I wanted to know. Sure.
Just a quick question about the monthly progress. GHD, are you getting responsiveness from Water? Are they able to come and do the maintenance that's needed? I just wanted to get an update on that.
Yeah, they've been to the plant already this past month, and we're getting them back tomorrow, and they're coming back in a couple more weeks. It's just really a limitation of equipment and personnel, but they're working, and we are getting responses, and we're constantly talking to them. I mean, ideally, we'd be their only clients, and they'd just show up every time we needed them. But it's a back and forth, and we're constantly talking to them, and we're getting service. So I'm glad to report that we're getting service.
And just to add to that, we're being pretty demanding of their time right now too, as a region, getting our work done, and we're one of their top clients as well. So,
Okay, fair enough.
Linda. Thanks. So Lou, I know it's in the March progress report is probably out, and there's probably some information in that. I just haven't seen it yet. But also, given what we're dealing with in April, the snow melt, the flooding concerns in March, and now again the rainfalls. I'm just wondering what containment is like on the site right now. Is there any?
So it's up and down. We have had loss of containment events, and we've enacted the additional sampling as required by the ministry. I don't know if we have all those results in, but the preliminary results again are indicative of no issue or no discharge of any COCs to the creek. And you are correct. I mean, the creek level is up and down. I believe they increased the flow again just this past week, actually today, to 12 meters a second. We're dealing with lots of water at the plant, and it's a typical kind of spring event for us, in that we see that water being stored in the bank and then coming back out, and we're doing what the approval requires of us when we do those events, and those data will be provided as soon as they're tabulated and received. So.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. No, it's just from my position, it's been a interesting year. It's been one we haven't seen in quite a while with the flows up and
You're
down
right.
like they have. I appreciate the fact, but I thank you for that. That's good. Thanks.
Any other questions? I was going to mention that Tiffany and I had the luxury of being contacted by a student who is doing a documentary, a Woolwich resident, former Woolwich resident. They've moved from school. We weren't able to connect with them, unfortunately, but I did want to update the committee that sounds like a project is ongoing. So I think a undergraduate thesis style media studies one. But I wanted to take this as an opportunity just to remind you, if anybody does reach out, by all means, you can speak to them. However, if you're speaking to them as a representative of TRAC, I just ask that you coordinate with myself, with Tiffany, with Alex, and even with Rianne from the township for a coordinated approach when it comes to media or interviews. And that brings us to our next meeting of June 18th. 2026, I believe that's at 6 p.m. Yes,
I won't be able to make that one. Sorry.
no problem. Do we know anybody else know on their schedule now that they won't be able to make it? Just trying to be mindful of quorum. Okay, so just Linda that we know of for now. Thanks for notifying me, Linda. And so that brings us to the end of our meeting, everybody. 4 minutes late, I'm sorry. I do appreciate you staying with us. We do need a motion for adjournment though, otherwise nobody's going anywhere.
We love it here tonight. No adjournment.
Susan and Linda, all in favor? And that's carried. Thanks, everyone.